Hey everybody, it's Casey. Today we're going to learn how to paint a sailboat on the ocean with watercolor pencils. Let's get started. Hello, today we're going to use some watercolor pencils. So I'm going to do a little video here of kind of a boat on some waves. And watercolor pencils are kind of just like a regular colored pencil, but the pigment inside them is made of watercolor, kind of what you would find in a normal tin of paints, only it's in the middle of a pencil. So we're basically drawing on our paper with the pigment, and we will add water later to turn that pigment into paint. Watercolor pencils are a wonderful way to get your stuff where you want it. Okay, so I'm going to start with some little like ocean waves. So I kind of want to be like, wee, wee. And so then I'm going to add in some other colors so that we have kind of some fun mixture of blue when we go to get this wet. And I'm going to add some green in there because the ocean can be sort of a blue-green. It'll all kind of blend at the end, so we don't have to worry too much about it looking weird right now. And then I might want a little bit of darkness kind of here in the bottoms of the waves. So I'm going to add some black and maybe blend it with a little bit of blue. Alright, and then for the tops, we can even add in some white if we're going to want that to be kind of a little bit brighter. And then I'll go back with my other color and kind of fill in so that when I go to wet this, we're going to have enough pigment on the paper. So it looks like a hot mess right now, but don't worry about that because it's gonna all like blend together and be really cool when we start. Okay, so I'm gonna have a boat. So this is gonna be like a sailboat. So let's just start. So it's gonna go kind of behind these waves. So we will bring it back out up here. And then we can go and add some more waves if we think that's maybe what we want later. And I'm not going to worry about the exact precise pattern. I'm just going to try to kind of mimic what the wood of a boat might look like with my patterns here. And think about and get a little imaginative with the other colors that might be showing up in some wood grain. So I'm going to go with some yellow. Maybe some orange. And then we also have some dark brown here. So I'm going to use this dark color more at the bottom of my boat because that is maybe where it would be darker in real life. And remember, you can get really, you don't have to go with realistic pictures when you paint. You can put some pink in your boat or some, you can make your boat pink and purple. Whatever seems good to you. Maybe I'll put a little pink in my boat just to be awesome. So I'm gonna put some pinks like up here. And we'll see how that turns out later. All right, so now I want to make my boat look a little bit like maybe there's also water behind it because this looks a little bit goofy. So I'm going to draw some more waves. And then kind of do the same thing I did before, like just color them in at the bottom. And add those other colors. Get a little crazy over here with the pencil order. All right, add some of this color to it. I really like this periwinkle, it's very pretty. Ultramarine, light ultramarine, so yeah, light blue. Okay, so I feel a little better about now that my boat feels like it's in the water. So then we're gonna have a sail on the boat. But I kind of want my sail to just stay white. So I'm just gonna draw it in pencil. So I'm gonna draw we'll have a sail going this way, that's triangular. And then we'll have a sail going this way that's kind of poofing out a little bit, triangular. Like this. And then we'll have our little flag at the top that's going wee. All right, so our mast is going to be black, which may or may not make sense, but it's what I'm doing. And we don't need a lot of pigment in here because it's a very thin, fine little thing. Okay. And then we're going to decide kind of what color we want our sky to be. So I'm going to have my sky be really pretty, and we're kind of just going to go in a faded rainbowish order this way. We're going to use yellow to orange, briefly to red, to purple. So we're going to kind of go like this across the page, sort of. So, and I've put tape around the edges so that when I peel this tape off my paper, there will be kind of a border. You can do that or you don't have to. It also helps the water keep from flopping off your page. And you don't need to color super hard with these because you're going to add water to them. You can always come back and add more pigment if you feel like you need it later. So I'm going to get a little blendy. So I'm going to definitely have orange here, but I also kind of want to go in where we already have yellow, so that when I go back in to color this, it's going to blend with the yellow nicely. So I'm going to get kind of right at the edge of that sail. And kind of think, hey, my sky would be orange down here. Again, this is not grounded in reality. This is just from imagination, so it doesn't have to be exactly what the sky looks like in real life. It can still be artistically nice if it's not exactly like real life. So then this is negative space behind the sail in our sky. As long as you're pressing lightly, you don't have to be very thoughtful about the direction of your lines. It can go in any direction. If you're pressing really hard when you're coloring with these, those lines may still show, so you'll want to be a little careful about that. Like here, we can press hard because when I paint, I don't really mind if the lines of the wood still show. I don't really mind if the lines in the water still show, but I definitely want my sky to be very, very blended and pretty. Alright, that's enough of the orange. So I'm going to come in with some red, and like I said, I'm going to kind of overlap my orangey areas a little bit. Whoops, I got in my sail a little bit. I guess we'll worry about that later. Another great attitude to have when you're painting is don't worry about your mistakes. You can always turn them into something that works with your piece later. And no one ever really knows it was a mistake but you, so you don't have to tell anybody. Blendy, blendy, blendy. Ooh, and now for our pretty purple. Okay, this is one of my favorite colors in a watercolor pencil just because of the way it blooms when you paint it. It's really pretty. So they do make sets of watercolor pencil that are bigger and have more colors in them. But you know, when you're in the middle of the pandemic, sometimes you use what you have on hand. All right, so I'm ready to begin painting. So I have a bunch of paintbrushes here. Because this has a bunch of little peaks, I'm gonna use a brush that also has a peak. So maybe like this one, because it's nice and sharp. So I'm getting it wet, and all I'm doing is putting my brush in water. I'm not going into paint. I'm just going into water. It's good to have a towel or a paper towel nearby, because you want to try and keep the water only here. You don't want drips of water here, because they can drip down and really mess you up. So just keep the water right at the tip of the brush. And you can always go and dry the rim of the brush on your towel if you need to. All right. So I'm going to paint in a way that allows things that are touching to dry between the painting time. That way it doesn't blend accidentally. So the first thing I'm going to do is paint this boat. And with the boat, I'm just going to go along the line and wet the paint that we have put down, because I do want it to kind of keep this stripy look. And anywhere that a color is a little too vivid, I can always go and blend that. But I'm liking the way this kind of doesn't completely blend, and it gives us several different colors in the same thing. So you can see that I'm kind of painting in the same direction as all of these lines, because I want to keep the variance of the colors. I don't want them to completely blend into one color, but I do want to make sure that if we have any stark lines, we kind of paint those away. We pick up that pigment and move it around. But I like the way all these colors are working together. It kind of makes me feel like, you know, if you're in the sunshine and you're looking at some very shiny wood grain, kind of the different colors you might see. So I don't want to paint this way, because that would blend my stripes too much. I'm just going to paint side to side. When we get over here, we can paint all different ways, but for now. And I'm trying not to touch my water to this blue very much at all, because I don't want to bring that blue into my boat. I want that to stay and be the waves. If you touch it a little bit, it's totally okay. It's not going to ruin anything. These little brushes with the pointy tips are wonderful for detail work. And this isn't a special brush. This is something that I picked up at an art store in a multi-pack that was about $5.99. All of these little brushes with the light yellow hair came with it, and it wasn't expensive at all. Expensive brushes do a great job, but you know, if you're not a professional painter and you're still learning, these kinds of brushes are absolutely fine. Okay, so our boat is painted. I'm seeing a couple of spots that I want a little more dark color. So I'm going to go ahead and take my pencil. We can go and we can draw on wet. That's okay. And then I get a little more water and wet that pigment officially. Even though we did paint it on to wet, I still want to add water to it so I can make it do what I want. All right, perfect. I am happier there. Okay, so our boat is done. So we don't want to paint anything that is touching the boat. So I'm going to go to a layer of waves that is not touching the boat. Oh, a lot of my layers of waves are touching the boat. All right, so we will start with this layer of wave. And I'm going to go along the top just to remind myself where this layer of waves boundary is. So I want to make sure that this top part remains a little bit dark, so we have the boundary of this wave, but then everything else down here can get sort of blendy. And that's going to give it a really nice look. So you can kind of see that by allowing us to draw these shapes before we go ahead and paint them, the watercolor pencil gives us a little more control of where the colors go on our painted page. So that is one of the things I like about them. They're not quite as fluid as when you are working with regular watercolors. Like, you don't just have that woo, very serene feel to them, but they do help you with control quite a bit. So if you're trying to do little bitty stuff, very involved flowers sometimes can be accomplished with a watercolor pencil a little more easily than with watercolors, depending on your skill level and how you like to do things. I like them both for very different reasons. And sometimes you can use them together in the same painting. You can use watercolor pencil for your very detailed stuff, and then you can use watercolors like to fill in your background or to paint your larger areas. So you can see that green looks pretty nice in there. I like how it kind of reminds me of the color of the water when the sun shines up from the back of it. Ah, all right, there's a hair from brush in my painting. So I'm just gonna paint it right off of the page. Oh no. All right. Okay, so there's one layer of waves. So you can see that's sort of what it's going to look like when we paint these others. But I'm going to skip to a place that doesn't touch the top of this wave and give it some time to dry. We'll see how our paint near this boat will behave. See what we can do with it. All right, so I'm going to start at this layer. And you can move your paper around. I'm not moving my paper around because I have it set where the video can see it. But you can move your paper around and change your paper direction if that helps you get your brush in the right place without setting your hand on a wet part of your painting. That can be kind of difficult. You also want to make sure that when you're painting that your hands are clean. If you have any oil or lotion on your hands, that can make it difficult for the watercolor to stick to the paper. It kind of gives it an oily resistance. So you want to make sure that you're either not touching your hand to the paper or that your hands are pretty clean. So you can see some of that black coming in. I'm not in love with it here at first. I don't really like it, but we're going to just make it work. It is a little darker than I had imagined, but that's okay. We still got our pretty blues and greens working for us. So I'm not super worried. There's some of that pretty green. So I'm going to be really careful right here along the boundary because I know that boat's not completely dry yet, and we can always go back at the very end and kind of fill in any spots that we see. So where you see a little pigment like this, you can just move your brush, the very tip of your brush around to kind of break it up so you don't have little spots in your paint. And same thing here, I'm going to be, oh, that's not the right layer, is it? No, yes it is. We're just going to make it all the right layer, I guess. So I'm going to wet this with the super duper tip of my brush, but I'm going to try really hard not to touch that brown at all, because it might give us a blending accident. There's some more of that black. Why did I put so much black down? That was a mistake. It's darkening everything. So you can dry your brush off to where it wants to suck up some water, and you can remove paint a little bit like that if you are happy with what you've done. You can't really completely erase it, but you can change it. All right, so far so good with the not getting paint where it doesn't need to go. Woohoo! Okay, and then this comes over and is this layer, I believe. Yes, that's what we did. And more of that black. I was a little heavy-handed with the black watercolor pencil, you guys. I really like the way that green is working with this blue. It's really pretty. I think we did not give enough green to this one, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put a little bit of that in there. Voila, green. All right, so then there's one more piece of this wave over here that we drew in. So I'm gonna go over and color that one in. All right, there is a lot of black here that it's not my favorite, so I'm gonna try and just blend it, and then we can get rid of it if we think it's too much darkness. But at the end, I think it's not gonna make a difference. I think it's gonna just look cool and textural, so that can stay the way it is, yay. Okay, and we didn't get anything into our boat, so that's making me happy. Here's a quick little trick. A good way to get your paint to dry quickly. Just grab a hair dryer. I have this little tiny one, but you can use a regular one. That's fine. Okay, so that's kind of, oh yeah, that's dry enough for us to go ahead and paint the next little section. I also didn't want you to have to listen to the hairdryer for a long time. All right, so I think I'll paint the top layer, this layer next, because I want that to dry before we paint the background. So, going right in with the top layer. And I want to make sure I get all the color out of this beautiful blue line. So I'm going to get it wet first and shape it nicely, and then I'll go in and do some blending. And I don't want to go too heavy or too close to this top blue line because I want it to keep its nice boundary in that difference of color. Great, so that one worked really nicely. I like it. I think it's pretty. I like the difference. You can see it's kind of seeping a little bit here, but I'm okay with that. I think that that just looks kind of oceany, so it's all good. Sometimes you may be painting and you're wondering, am I doing this right? Is this going to look good at the end? Try to not put that sort of pressure on yourself. Try to just let the painting part of things be fun and let it be about color and movement. And try not to get too involved with criticizing yourself or not liking things about your painting while you're creating it. Just try to think about the tiny little moment that you're in charge of right now. So I am in charge of how I feel about this painting and what I'm gonna make of it. And even when I make little mistakes in it, I'm not gonna let that bother me a whole lot, because this painting isn't for anybody else, it's for me. And I like water, and I like watching boats go by. And I like thinking about being on a sailboat on a beautiful ocean. So I'm gonna let that be my happy thing about this painting. I am just going to think about how calm and peaceful it is, and how much I really like this color blue that I'm working with right now. So I see some thick borders of color, so I'm just kind of trying to take the tip of my brush and sweep those down and get them into the body of this wave. And there's not any green up here, but I'm okay with that because I want it to kind of be differentiated from the other wave a little bit. All right, I like it. So I guess now, here we are, I'm gonna go try and do this last wave that we have in there. I think I can do it. If it seeps into the other waves, I'm totally not gonna be upset about it. I'm already making that decision. That is just going to be the style of this painting if it happens. So while I paint this one, I'll talk a little bit about watercolor paper as opposed to other kinds of paper that you can use. So watercolor paper is made not to absorb water. It's going to let your water and your paint and all those pigments kind of stay on top so that you can blend it, and it doesn't dry super fast. But watercolor paper is here for you when you're using water in your painting. So you definitely, if you have the capability, want to find watercolor paper to use with your watercolors and watercolor pencils. You should be able to find it at any craft store. You may be able to find it at larger stores like Target and Walmart, or places that you're buying other art supplies. And there's really expensive watercolor paper, and there's some that's a little less expensive. As a beginner or a hobbyist, you can use any of it. The thicker it is, the less the paper will kind of curl up as it gets water on it. The thicker it is, the less absorbent it is, which is what we want with watercolor. So if you feel like splurging, get some good paper. If that's not in your budget or it's not important to you, then the regular watercolor paper that's more budget friendly is totally fine. Don't worry about it. maybe start out with less expensive watercolor, and then if you find it's something that really relaxes you and you really want to invest in the hobby, you can get yourself some nicer paper. With watercolor paper, I could do things like take a drop of water and leave it on the surface and it's gonna stay there. If you used regular drawing paper with watercolor paint, it would suck that little dot down really quickly, like a paper towel, because it's just more porous and built for a different activity. Construction paper specifically is pretty bad for watercolor. It'll look fine when it dries, but it's very difficult to control the paint because the water just sucks up into the paper. Well, see, we've broken the boundary here, so I'm just gonna be okay with that because it's water. It's all good. We still have our pretty dark boundary of paint there, so I'm happy about that. If I had given it some more time to dry or run the hairdryer over it longer, that probably wouldn't have happened. But like I said, I'm just gonna let it be. Maybe it looks like a crashier, splashier part of that wave. All right, so our waves are all painted in. And I'm going to take my brush and go back and find these little tiny white spots that I don't want to be little tiny white spots and color them in. Alright, so oh, there's another one. Kind of blend this security breach over here. Okay. So we're good. So now we can start painting this background. And for the background, I'm going to use a little bit larger brush because I wanted to hold more water because we have to cover all this ground or sky. All right, brush. What do we want? What do we want? I'm picking this brush because it kind of holds quite a bit of water. So I'm just going to apply kind of a lot of water here because we can work it into the painting. And I'm going to keep kind of this sort of motion as I can. It doesn't matter once we get over here because there's a lot of little tiny spaces to fill. So, see how pretty that yellow blooms when we add water to it? And then the orange is just really going to get nice and bright for us too. Alright, so pretty. I love when you're painting the sky and something like this because it kind of is finally making this piece come alive. So I'm just going to kind of be very, I'm going to run along the boundary of this sail with my brush, so I give myself like, whoops, okay, so I give myself a little boundary, and then I can go away from it as opposed to toward it. But isn't that lovely, the way the paint just kind of, woo, I'm here. It gets really pretty for us. So I'm going to switch back to my little tiny brush when I get in these little tiny places, because this big giant brush is just not going to do the job as well. You can do it across the very straight parts, but I don't want to chance it getting into those waves with orange, because that would be kind of not the best color combo. Like, I don't really mind if I get a little bit of this boat into my sky, because it's similar colors. Like this right here, that's just fun. I'm not going to worry about it. But closer down here to these waves, I'm definitely going to go back to my other brush. I just want to get enough water on the paper. Over here. All right. So I'm going to go back to my kind of pointy brush that we were using before. And I'll get in these little detail areas. If you just have one brush, you just have the brush that came with a set of paints you have, that's okay. Just make do your best. You can give your brush a haircut with some scissors to make it more pointy. But be careful if that's your only brush, because you might really mess it up. Alright, I need some more paint, so I'm going to go up here. I'm going to pull down some of this orange. Ah! Alright, I got involved with the wave over here. I'm going to dry out this brush and kind of try and get some of that off of there. We'll come back and fix this up later. But nobody ever has to know about that if we don't tell them. They may have thought we did that on purpose, so. Okay. These little areas I may need to come back when the whole painting is drier and just fix up these boundaries, because I'm afraid my blue is going to just bleed over. All right. So now for this middle section here, I'm just going to put down the water and then come back with my littler brush again and blend it up. And I'm kind of regretting having already put the mast here because it's black, but we'll cross this bridge in a little while. Like, I don't want too much of that black infiltrating my beautiful sunset or sunrise colors, whatever this is. Whatever time of day I decide it is, whether it is a sunrise or a sunset sail. Alright, and then I'm going to come and get really detail-y over here. You can bring in more water at any time. You can go over places that are already dry if you need to blend it a little better. If I was on a regular table, I would probably rotate this so I don't have my arm over the top of everything, but I'm going to do my best. So my little ship's flag is outlined, yay. All right. This is complicated. All right, now I'm going back to this bigger brush because I can bring some water up along the side of my sail. That purple is so pretty. So I'm just going to keep going, adding water to this purple and the pink so that these colors look really, really nice. And I'm just going to get more water and I'm going to let this color bloom. So this is what watercolor pencils just really excel at, is it doesn't look that bright and pretty when you put them on the paper, but then when you get that water on there, it's just like, woo, that's gorgeous. I love it. Okay. So again, I'm going to be really careful here at the boundary. Because see this action over here, that is not what I was going for, but we're going to make it work. I'm not worried about it too much. All right, so I'm going to go along the border of this sail very carefully. You can see where we had some of that red in there. That's so pretty. I really like it. Okay. So I'm going to come down and mix up all of this purple pigment that's on the paper. It's looking really, really good. And I'm going to try to be careful about my boundaries, but if I run over it, it's totally okay. And I'm going to try not to mix this purple up with the blue too much, but if that happens, again, we're just going to deal with it. All right, so I need to come and make this boundary a little nicer. So there we go. I did it. And now that I'm looking, I see that I do have a little white space over here, so I'm going to close that up. And what else can we do? Okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to bring out the hairdryer. So if it's too loud for you, you can go ahead and mute here in a minute, or turn your volume down. All right, you ready? Here we go with the hairdryer. 3, 2, 1. That's pretty dry. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some water on the watercolor pencil that I have chosen for the mast. And now that this is a little drier, I can put my hand down on it and we should be okay. So I'm going to try to put as little water as possible on this mast because I don't want it to get big and huge and weird. And I just dropped a little drop of paint where I didn't mean to, a little drop of water where I didn't mean to. So I'm going to take a completely dry brush and I got rid of that water. So that's a little trick how you can do that. So the mask is looking okay. Oh, there's a little tiny place at the bottom where it needs a little more paint. All right, super fast hair dryer. Sorry, I know everyone hates this, but all right. So for the rest of this, I think I'm gonna maybe finish it off with just regular watercolor because there are some little special things I want to do. So I'm gonna put the pencils over here. I'm gonna grab my, this is kind of just regular watercolors. So I'm gonna grab those, stick them here, and I'm gonna get my little fine tip brush again. So this time I'm going to use a red. I'm going to make the flag at the top of my boat red. Because why not? So I'm just going to color this in. Whee! My wavy little flag is red. And you could still do this with watercolor pencil if that's all you have, if you don't have paints. Or if you want to make yourself some paint, you can do something really quick. Like, you could take your red and you could scribble some of it on paper or whatever. And you could add a little water to it and kind of just make yourself some paint there. So that's good red paint. Whee! Okay. Wow, no, that's really, really red. I'm gonna wipe this off because I know me, and I will put my hand in it if I don't. Okay, so now my question is, do I want to put anything on these sails? Do I want to try and shade them a little bit? And I think I do. So I'm going to take a tiny bit of black and mix it into some dark blue that I have over here. I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but this is just a very light wash of watercolor that I'm coming in with here. And I'm just going to kind of do this, and you can barely see it, I know, but that's okay. That's what I want. And I want, because my lights over here, this back edge is going to be a little darker, and I want to show that it's kind of billowing, so I'm going to make my lines like that. Okay, so there's that sail. And then this sail, I'm just the same thing, but like so light, so very light. Kind of like that. So I'm just gonna give it a little tiny bit of texture, but we need like relatively zero paint to make this happen. So now we're done. I want to add one last thing. I want some kind of sea spray, some ocean stuff down there. So I'm going to grab a brush. I'm using this brush. You can use kind of whatever brush. You want a brush that has a lot of firm bristles. I'm going to make sure my brush is super clean. Make sure that it doesn't have any paint in it. And I'm going to go into this white. So I'm going to get this white here. And I want it to be sort of watery, because if it's too thick, it's not going to work well. I'm going to get another brush. So this is my like tapping brush, and I'm just going to tap. And when you run out, just get some more and start the tippy tapping again. So that gives us a little bit more dimension. And I got all up here, which I wasn't planning, but it's okay. You kind of have to play with it and see how much tapping you want to do. And you can do that on another piece of paper if you're worried about messing up this painting that you have just worked a really long time on. So I want specifically right at the top of this wave, I want a lot of little sea spray. Alright, so I think I'm good. Because I don't really want it on this sail, I'm just going to wipe it off with a dry brush. Because I can. And you can't see it because it's white. So that's kind of a fun trick. Anywhere you don't really want it, just get rid of it. Goodbye. 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 Don't want you there. Alright, so I think I'm done. And now I'm going to pull off the tape. And we're going to reveal how nice it looks with this border. Does that look great or what? I love it. I'm pretty happy with it. I can always go back and add more things if I want to later. But for now, I'm just going to sign it. And there we go. There's our sailboat. I hope that you enjoyed watching painting with me. I hope this makes you want to paint, and have a wonderful day.